People like you only show up here to ask, never to contribute, snarled Margaret Thornton as the dry crack of her palm echoed against Diane Porter's cheek. The baby in her arms, Emma, startled at the violent impact and began to cry. Margaret's gold bracelet jingled as she leaned forward, her face contorted with disdain and superiority. "Oh, spare me," she continued, her voice thick with venom. "Mothers like you are always making up stories to play the victim. Go try that trick somewhere else." Diane held Emma tightly against her chest, protecting her daughter's trembling body while her face burned with shame and pain. Around them, shoppers at the Riverside Plaza Mall in Charlotte, North Carolina, stood silently. Cell phones half raised, shocked stares, whispers cutting through the heavy air. Margaret crumpled the charity collection envelope as if it were trash and dropped it at Diane's feet, the paper now wrinkled and dirty on the gleaming marble floor. What she didn't know, and everyone would soon find out, was that she had just humiliated the only woman capable of bringing down everything she thought she controlled. Before we continue this story, please comment on which city or country you are watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This is just the first twist in a story that will surprise you. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Riverside Trust Bank, casting a golden light on the marble floor that reflected the hurried movement of customers. Diane Porter adjusted little Emma's car seat. Emma babbled happily, wiggling her tiny feet as they waited patiently in line. Inside Diane's bag, the envelope containing the check for the church's charity collection seemed to hold symbolic weight. It was money that would help dozens of elderly people in the neighborhood buy their medication that month. When her turn finally came, she approached the counter with a serene smile. "Good morning. I would like to deposit this check, please," she said, carefully balancing Emma's bag and the envelope. Before the teller could respond, Margaret Thornton, the bank manager, intervened with firm steps and a cold stare. The sound of her heels echoed through the silent lobby as she snatched the check from Diane's hands. "What is that?" Diane asked, surprised. Margaret held up the paper suspiciously, and her sharp voice echoed deliberately for all to hear. $10,000. "From a church," he said, stretching out the words with irony. Diane felt everyone's gaze turn to her. Even so, she maintained her calm tone, her heart racing. "This is from this morning's charity event. I'm the community relations coordinator for the parish. All the documentation is there." Margaret interrupted her with an impatient gesture. "Documentation! Anyone can forge papers these days," he said, in a tone laden with contempt. "We're fed up with church scams." The way she pronounced church sounded offensive. The elderly man with a cane looked away. A young mother in line squeezed her cell phone, feigning distraction. "I assure you everything is in order," Diane murmured, feeling Emma shift uneasy with the tension. "I can call Pastor Daniel Mitchell right now if you want to confirm." Margaret gave a dry laugh. "Sure, I imagine that Pastor is all ready to confirm the story, right?" he said sarcastically, holding the check up to the light. "This looks like a forgery to me. In fact, I think we need to confiscate it and call the police." Diane's blood ran cold. The humiliation burned. "Please, you don't need to do that. If you don't want to make the deposit, return it." "Return it?" Margaret repeated with a crooked smile. "You're not leaving here with that fake check." And she picked up the phone from the desk. "I'm calling the police right now." Diane took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears. She picked up Emma's bag and turned around. "I don't need to be treated like this here." But Margaret stepped forward with a sudden movement, her hand with red nails gripping Diane's arm. "Don't you dare turn your back on me," he shouted, pulling her forcefully. The gesture made the baby seat rock. Emma screamed in fright. "Let me go! My baby!" Diane pleaded, trying to break free. The slap came like a dry crack, shattering the air in the lobby. The sound reverberated off the walls, silencing everything around. Diane's cheek burned, her eyes welled with tears. She wrapped Emma in her arms, protecting her daughter who was crying in despair. A murmur of horror filled the air. "My God," someone whispered. An elderly lady, with grey hair and a firm posture, stepped forward. "I saw everything," exclaimed Edith Wallace, holding up her cell phone. "It's all recorded here." Margaret's face hardened. "You can't record. It's against bank rules." "Of course I can," Edith retorted, her voice trembling with indignation. "He just assaulted a mother with a baby in her arms, and I recorded everything." Diane was trying to calm Emma, her heart racing, her vision blurry. "It's all right, darling," Edith said, placing herself between the two. "Stand firm. I have proof of what that woman did." Margaret, now pale, pointed to the entrance. "Safety, now!" Two security guards began to approach, hesitant at the scene. Diane could barely stand, but the elderly woman's presence gave her strength. "Stand strong, my daughter," Edith whispered. "Everyone saw. This woman showed who she really is." The other customers formed a circle around, filming, murmuring, indignant. Emma sobbed in her mother's arms. "She attacked me," Diane said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to leave." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes the downfall of someone powerful. "She grabbed me and hit me while I was holding my baby." Diane Porter's voice trembled, but not from fear, from indignation. "We all saw it," confirmed Mr. Vernon Hayes, a man in a dark suit, finally finding the courage to speak. "It was completely gratuitous." The two Riverside Trust Bank security guards approached with quick steps and uncertain looks. The scene before them was a portrait of contained chaos, a trembling young mother with a crying baby in her arms, an elderly lady still recording on her cell phone, angry customers, and a bank manager on the verge of losing control. Edith Wallace's voice sounded as firm as steel wrapped in velvet. "You chose the wrong day to show who you really are, Margaret Thornton." The security guards exchanged hesitant glances. The tallest one, with the Officer Davis badge, tried to maintain a neutral tone. "Madam, we need you to come with us." "Come with us?" Edith retorted, raising her chin. "That girl was just assaulted while holding the baby. The only person who should be escorted away from here is that manager over there," she said, pointing to Margaret, who stood behind the desk with her arms crossed and a cold look in her eyes. The lobby was shrouded in a tense silence, broken only by Emma's sobs. Several customers leaned against the walls, cell phones in hand, recording everything. The morning sun streamed through the windows, turning the air into a suffocating mixture of heat and indignation. "Please speak more quietly," requested the second security guard, Walker, trying to touch Diane's arm. "We need to settle this outside." "Don't you dare touch her," Edith warned, placing herself between them. "I have video evidence of your manager assaulting this woman. Want to see it?" She turned her phone over, and the freeze frame showed the exact moment of the slap. Officer Davis leaned forward, uncomfortable. "Madam, we still need to—" "She's right," interrupted a new voice. A thin man with white hair and a sturdy cane advanced with determination. "I saw everything," stated Mr. Howard Green. "That woman grabbed her mother and slapped her in the face for no reason at all." His cane hit the floor, its sound echoing through the lobby. "I saw it too," added Miss Beverly Crawford, a woman with an impeccable updo. "It was outrageous. The girl just wanted to leave in peace." Margaret exploded. "That's not what happened at all. She became aggressive when I questioned a suspicious check. Security, remove her from here now." "Aggressive?" Beverly retorted, her voice choked with anger. "The only aggression I saw was yours. Everyone here saw it." The security guards, divided, looked back and forth between the furious faces of the customers and the manager who no longer inspired any authority. Officer Davis looked at the video again, his face hardened. "According to protocol, we have to remove all parties involved in a fight," he said in a low voice. "We need to ask them to leave the premises." "Then fire your manager too," demanded Edith, pointing her finger as if in a sentence. Walker stammered. "The head office will handle it internally. Please, ladies, let's resolve this externally before it gets worse." Diane took a deep breath. The initial fear had given way to a cold, almost solemn strength. She adjusted Emma's baby seat and lifted her face, still marked by the slap. "I want to file a police report," she declared, her voice firm. "I want it on record that I was assaulted inside this bank." Margaret Thornton's laughter was like a blade cutting through the silence. "Go ahead, register whatever you want. Let's see who they believe," he said, adjusting his blazer arrogantly. "Security, I won't ask for it again." The guards positioned themselves beside Diane, indicating the exit without touching her. Edith followed along, her cell phone still recording. Other customers, many of them elderly, formed a kind of human corridor, protecting Diane as she walked. "This isn't over," Edith announced loudly as they reached the glass doors. "Not even close," Diane replied, the cool morning breeze brushing against her warm face. Behind them, Margaret's artificial voice echoed, "Next customer, please." Outside, Edith led Diane to a concrete bench near the parking lot. "Sit down, my daughter. Take a breath," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "Give me your number. I won't let this stay hidden." Diane was breathing heavily, still trying to calm Emma, when the bank's side door opened discreetly. A young cashier with a name tag that read Rachel Stevens stepped out, glancing around. She approached quickly, speaking softly. "I'm so sorry," she said, placing a folded piece of paper in Diane's hand. "She's done this before. Please don't stay silent. Some of us want to help, but we're afraid of losing our jobs." Before they could answer, Rachel rushed back inside. Diane unfolded the note with trembling fingers and felt that for the first time that morning the truth was finally beginning to stir. The handwriting on the note was hurried, but perfectly legible. "Manager Margaret Thornton has already harmed other clients, mainly black people. The HR department is covering it all up. Please don't let this go unpunished. Fight back." Diane Porter carefully folded the paper, feeling a chill down her spine. She tucked it into her bag, as if protecting living proof. She looked at Emma, who was finally asleep, exhausted and sweaty in her baby seat. When she looked up at the mirrored facade of the Riverside Trust Bank, she saw Margaret Thornton watching them from the other side of the windows, the same smug, icy smile on her face. The distant sound of approaching sirens cut through the heavy morning silence. Within seconds, red and blue lights began flashing in the reflection of the glass. 2 Charlotte Police Department vehicles pulled into the parking lot, their tires screeching on the asphalt. "Stay strong," Edith Wallace said, her hand resting on Diane's shoulder. "I'm here with you, and I have the video saved. This woman chose the wrong people to humiliate today." Diane took a deep breath. Her cheek still stung where she had been slapped, but her voice came out firm. "Thank you, Edith. I won't let her get away with it." The cars pulled up. The police car doors opened in unison, and 2 officers got out. The small group of elderly people, Howard Green, Beverly Crawford, and other patrons, formed a protective circle around Diane and Emma, who slept peacefully, unaware of the weight of that moment. Edith held up her phone. The video was open and ready. On the other side of the windows, Margaret Thornton's face finally faltered. The smile vanished. 2 police officers approached. The taller one, Sergeant Collins, opened a notepad, while his partner, Officer Brooks, stood a little behind, observing everything. "Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance," Collins said in a professional, almost cold tone. "Can you explain what happened?" Before Diane could answer, Edith intervened. "I have it all on video. This manager assaulted this young mother while she was holding her baby. Do you want to see it?" Collins raised his hand. "One moment, ma'am. Let's hear from the other side first." He turned to Diane. "What led to this confusion?" Diane adjusted the baby seat, took a deep breath, and replied calmly, "I came to deposit a check for church charity donations. The manager accused me of suspicious behavior, took the check, and when I tried to leave, grabbed my arm and slapped me in the face." Officer Brooks crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "And what did you do to provoke this reaction?" A murmur of indignation spread. Howard Green stepped forward, indignant. "Provoke? She didn't do anything. I saw everything." "We all saw it," Beverly Crawford emphasized, her voice breaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," interrupted the sergeant, trying to maintain control of the scene. "We need to hear all sides." He turned back to Diane. Did the woman raise her voice? Did she make any sudden or threatening movements? "Of course not," she replied, her voice firm but choked with emotion. "I had the baby in my arms. I just wanted to leave. Why would I start something like this?" Officer Brooks shrugged. "Sometimes people get upset in financial situations. The bank has protocols." Edith stepped forward and held out her cell phone. "So watch. It's all here." This young woman did absolutely nothing. The police officers watched the video. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Sergeant Collins made some notes while Officer Brooks walked toward the bank door, where 2 security guards were waiting for them. "The bank staff informed me that they will handle the matter internally," Collins said, closing the notepad. "They are closing for the day to investigate what happened." "Internally?" Edith's voice rose, filled with indignation. "That was assault. We all saw it." "Ma'am, please remain calm," Officer Brooks requested from the entrance. "The bank has its own protocols for handling this type of complaint." Diane felt her body tremble. The sun's heat reflected off the windows, and the world seemed to spin. "I want to file a police report," he said firmly. "This isn't a customer complaint. This is assault." Sergeant Collins sighed impassively. "The lady can file a police report if she wishes. However, since the incident occurred on private property and involves company employees, the bank has the right to address the matter internally first." Beverly Crawford stepped forward. "We are witnesses. 6 of us saw what happened, and we can all confirm it." "We appreciate your cooperation," Collins replied diplomatically, "but now we need everyone to step aside. The bank will be closed." The group slowly dispersed, still indignant. Diane's cell phone vibrated in her bag. She looked at the screen. Her supervisor's name, Mr. Kenneth Palmer, flashed in cold letters. Diane took a deep breath. Inside, she knew the fight was only just beginning. She had completely forgotten about work. "I need to answer this," murmured Diane Porter, stepping away from the small group of elderly people who still surrounded her. Her hands trembled as she answered the phone. "Diane, where are you?" Mr. Kenneth Palmer's voice, her supervisor, sounded tense. "The community center meeting started 15 minutes ago. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. "There was an incident at the bank." My throat tightened. The words simply wouldn't come out. Edith Wallace noticed and calmly took the cell phone from the girl's trembling hands. "Good afternoon. This is Edith Wallace. I'm speaking with Diane from Riverside Trust Bank. She has just been through a serious incident and needs the day off. I can forward the documentation if needed." He waited a moment. "Yes, thank you for your understanding." "She will contact you later," she said, returning the device. Diane staggered. The adrenaline that had kept her standing since the slap was now dissipating, leaving behind an exhausted emptiness. "You're not in a condition to drive," Edith declared, grabbing his arm. "Where do you live? I'll take you." "But what about the video?" Diane protested weakly. "We need to make copies." "I already did," Edith replied confidently. "I sent it to my email and to my niece as soon as it happened. Now tell me, where is your car?" The group of elderly people, Howard Green, Beverly Crawford and others insisted on staying until Diane was safely inside Edith's car. They exchanged phone numbers, promised to be witnesses, and watched as the car drove away. In the parking lot, Sergeant Collins was still taking notes, while Officer Brooks argued with the bank's security guards. Edith drove slowly along Charlotte's avenues, traffic already building up, the air stifling with the late morning heat. In the passenger seat, Diane was curled up with Emma fast asleep in her car seat. "Turn left here." "Building C," she murmured, almost in a whisper. "You need to rest," Edith stated sweetly but firmly. "We'll file a police report early tomorrow morning. This bank wants to bury the case, but we won't let them." Diane simply nodded, too exhausted to reply. When Edith parked, her cell phone vibrated. A new message appeared on the screen from an unknown number. "Please send the images of this morning's incident for our internal analysis. Corporate Security, Riverside Trust Bank." The two exchanged silent glances. The bank was already trying to control the narrative. Shortly after, more messages arrived, each one more insistent than the last. "We need the original video. Your cooperation will ensure a swift resolution." "Don't delete anything," Edith warned, her voice firm. "Every single message like this is proof." Diane settled Emma in her lap. "They're acting like I did something wrong. I just tried to deposit the money for the senior citizens meal program. I know, my daughter." Edith touched her hand empathetically. "I've been going to that agency for 15 years. I've seen how that woman treats anyone she thinks she can humiliate." A new notification sound interrupted the moment. This time, the message was signed. "This is James Hartwell from Riverside Trust Bank headquarters. We request your immediate cooperation for a swift resolution of the incident." Edith let out a dry laugh. "Quick fix? That's a cover-up." Diane, overcome by a bad feeling, opened the banking app on her cell phone. He typed in the password. He waited for the screen to load, and he turned pale. No, they couldn't have done that. "What happened?" Edith asked, leaning forward. "My accounts are blocked, all of them." On the screen, the warning shone in red. "Account temporarily suspended due to suspicious activity." Edith's face flushed with anger. "This is retaliation. They're trying to silence you." Diane dialed the customer service number. After minutes of waiting and 3 automated menus, a male voice finally answered. "Riverside Trust Bank Customer Service, this is Tyler Nelson. Good afternoon. How can I help you? My accounts have been blocked. I need to unblock them." "I have bills to pay. I need to buy formula for my daughter. Just a moment while I verify your information, ma'am." The silence on the other end was long and unsettling. "I see here that your accounts have been flagged for suspicious activity. Unfortunately, I cannot change this status." Diane felt her blood run cold. "Suspicious activity? I was assaulted by the branch manager this morning. There are witnesses. Madam, it appears here that you are being investigated for attempted fraudulent check deposit and aggressive behavior towards employees. I cannot discuss the case further or change its status." Diane was speechless. "That's a lie. It's all on video." "I understand you're nervous," the attendant replied, his voice cold and mechanical. "But I need you to remain calm." And the click at the end of the line sounded like a verdict. Diane lowered her phone, her gaze lost. Beside him, Edith clenched her fists. "They think they can destroy a woman with a baby and get away with it. But if it's war they want..." She took a deep breath, her gaze firm. "They'll find out they chose the wrong target. Any threatening language will be noted on your record," said the operator's cold voice before the dry click ended the call. Edith Wallace slowly lowered the phone, her face burning with indignation. "Now listen here, young man," she began before the line dropped, holding the phone as if she could pass it through. "They hung up on me." "They're trying to paint me as the aggressor," murmured Diane Porter, tears finally streaming freely down her face. "They're distorting everything." "Not for long," Edith retorted, her voice firm. She opened her purse and pulled out her own cell phone. "My niece, Dr. Claire Wallace, is exactly who we need right now, a civil rights lawyer. She lives to fight against this kind of injustice." "A lawyer?" Diane shook her head, uncertain. "I don't have the money to pay for any lawyer." "Stop right there." Edith raised her hand, cutting her off. "Claire will accept the case as soon as she sees the video. Trust me, girl." Before they could continue, Diane's cell phone vibrated again. A new message from Riverside Trust Bank appeared on the screen. "Failure to cooperate with our investigation may result in further account restrictions and possible legal action." "They're threatening me," she whispered, hugging Emma tightly. "They're trying to intimidate you, Diane," Edith said seriously. "Classic tactic of someone who's guilty." She quickly dialed a number. "I'll call Claire right now." "What if they're right?" Diane's voice barely escaped. "What if nobody believes me? I'm just a single mother facing a giant bank." Edith turned to look her in the eyes. "Listen here, Diane Porter. I've spent 40 years teaching children how to stand up to bullies. I saw that woman assault you in front of a dozen witnesses. She did it because she believed she could, but this time she chose the wrong person." Emma began to cry, sensing the tension in the air. Diane stood up, cradling her daughter, pacing back and forth across the small room. The setting sun streamed through the blinds, casting golden stripes on the walls, marking the end of the longest day of her life. "I'm going outside to call Claire," Edith said, grabbing her purse. "You take care of your daughter. We're not alone in this anymore." Diane simply nodded, her voice caught in a knot. He watched Edith cross the balcony with the phone already to her ear. On the other side of the glass door, I could see the older woman gesturing energetically as she spoke. The room grew darker as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. Diane turned on the lamp, its warm glow contrasting with the shadow that settled within. Emma was now sobbing softly. "It's okay, my love," Diane whispered, stroking the baby's hair. "Mommy's here. Everything will be all right." But she herself didn't believe it. Outside, Edith's voice echoed firmly, explaining to her niece, "Everything recorded on video. Blatant abuse of power. Accounts blocked." Diane leaned back on the sofa, exhausted. Her cell phone was still vibrating on the table with new messages from the bank, but she didn't have the strength to look. She only focused on the warmth of Emma against her chest, trying to find strength in the simple fact that they were still together. Later, standing in the kitchen, Diane mechanically chopped vegetables for a soup she wasn't sure if she'd be able to eat. The sound of the knife against the cutting board was almost hypnotic, the only rhythm that kept her mind quiet. Her cell phone, silent beside her, made her glance at it from time to time. Edith was still on the balcony, almost an hour into her life, sorting everything out with that lawyer niece. Emma was dozing on the small swing. Her fists were clenched, her face serene. The scene brought tears to Diane's eyes again. She wiped them away with her arm, avoiding touching her face with her hands that smelled of onions. The soup was beginning to boil when 3 dry knocks echoed from the door. Diane's heart raced. She stood motionless, the knife suspended above a carrot cut in half. She wasn't expecting anyone. After the day she'd had, any sound was enough to set her on edge. "Diane, it's me, Dr. Claire Wallace, Edith's niece. I came straight from the courthouse." His voice was firm, confident. Diane felt relief wash over her. He ran to the door and opened it. Before her stood a woman in a dark grey suit, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and a leather briefcase under her arm, heavy enough to seem to contain the entire penal code. "Thank you for coming," said Diane, making room for her to enter. "I was making soup. Would you like some?" Dr. Claire smiled briefly. "I'd love to, but we don't have time for soup today," she replied gently, placing the folder on the table. "We have a lot of work ahead of us." Diane took a deep breath. For the first time that day, she felt something new emerge amidst the fear, a spark of hope. "We need to record everything while the memory is still fresh," said Dr. Claire Wallace, pulling up a chair and settling at Diane Porter's small dining table. "But please don't stop me from eating. You've had a hell of a day." Diane smiled, tired. The lawyer opened her leather briefcase with the precision of someone who has already turned chaos into routine. "First, show me Edith's video." Diane opened the message Edith had sent. The video began to play, sharp, almost cruel in its clarity. Margaret Thornton's furious face, the sound of the sharp slap, the instant Diane staggered back, shielding Emma with her body. Seeing it all again made her face burn with shame and pain. "Perfect quality," Claire murmured, already noting details. "Obvious aggression, clear visual record of his defensive posture, and several witnesses in the frame. This is excellent." She looked up. "Where is the ticket from the cashier?" Diane picked up her bag and took out the folded paper. It was a little crumpled, but the words were still legible. "She's done this before. Please don't stay silent." "Perfect," Claire said, analyzing. "This shows a pattern of behavior." "And what about the account being blocked?" he asked. Diane opened the Riverside Trust Bank app and showed the screen. Emma started to fuss, and she picked her up, balancing the baby while trying to hold the phone. "Let me see," Claire asked, picking up the phone. Her expression darkened as she read the messages. "They're building a counter-narrative. Classic corporate defense playbook. Freeze assets, apply pressure, reverse roles." "But why?" Diane asked, gently shaking Emma. "Everyone saw what happened. Because if they can't make you give up, they'll try to destroy your credibility," Claire replied seriously. "And if they're even more cowardly, they might claim you became aggressive while holding the baby. That could lead to a complaint to the Department of Children's Services." The ground seemed to disappear beneath Diane's feet. She pressed Emma tightly against her chest. "They wouldn't do that." "They would," Claire replied. "I've seen it before. But don't worry, we won't let it happen. We'll document everything tonight and file formal complaints tomorrow morning." She picked up a notepad. "I want you to tell me everything. From the moment you walked into that bank, every gesture, every word." During the next hour, Diane recounted the entire morning as she prepared Emma's bottle. She spoke of Margaret's immediate hostility, how she questioned the church collection check, and the violent way she grabbed her arm when she tried to leave. "The check was for the Senior Citizens Meal Program," Diane explained, testing the temperature of the baby bottle on her wrist. "I've deposited similar checks before, never had a problem." Claire nodded, making quick notes. "She chose you as her target, and I bet she wasn't the first. That note from the employee is gold. It shows that the bank is aware of abusive behavior and does nothing about it." He looked at his watch. "Tomorrow will be hectic. We're going to the police station at 8 to file a police report for assault. Afterward, we'll go to the regional bank branch to formally file the complaint. I want Edith with us to testify while everything is still fresh in our minds." Emma finished nursing and fell asleep. Diane gently burped her, the maternal touch contrasting with the heaviness of the last few hours. "The secret is to act before they do," Claire explained. "Overwhelm the system with official documentation, create a trail that can't be erased. Police reports, discrimination complaints, complaints to the Federal Banking Commission. Let's fill their path with paperwork." She closed the folder and smiled slightly. "Now try to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day, but you are not alone." At the door before leaving, he turned around. "Diane, you're doing the right thing. Never doubt that." Diane stood still, listening to the sound of the door closing. She turned off the stove of the forgotten soup, picked up Emma, and went to the small room decorated with paper butterflies. She laid her daughter in the crib and adjusted the little blanket. "I promise, my love," she whispered, caressing the baby's little face. "Mommy will fight. No one has the right to treat us like this. She set her alarm for 6 in the morning. As the room filled with the silence of the night, her cell phone vibrated with a new message from Edith. "We're with you. Justice will prevail." Diane placed the device on the nightstand and lay down, listening to the soft sound of Emma's breathing through the baby monitor. It was the most comforting sound in the world. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but for now, mother and daughter could rest. And when the sun finally began to rise over Charlotte, Diane was already ready. She placed Emma in her car seat, fastened her seatbelt, and glanced in the rearview mirror. Edith arrived promptly at 7:30 a.m. in her silver sedan, with Dr. Claire Wallace beside her, surrounded by stacks of documents. "Did you manage to get some sleep?" Edith asked, seeing the girl's tired face. Diane gave a small smile. "A little," he replied. But the deep, dark circles under their eyes told a different story. Their struggle, now also a fight for justice, was only just beginning. Every time Diane Porter dozed off, she saw Margaret Thornton's face contorted with rage and felt the sting of the slap burning her skin again. The following morning arrived heavy. The police station was a low, dilapidated brick building with dark windows that blocked the bright North Carolina sun. Inside, the cold, white light from the fluorescent lamps made the atmosphere almost sickly. A sergeant on duty escorted them to Detective Morrison, a burly man with a tired look sitting in front of an old computer. "So, do you want to file an assault complaint?" he asked, without looking up from the screen. "About a bank manager?" Dr. Claire Wallace answered before Diane could open her mouth. "A bank manager who physically assaulted my client while she was holding her infant daughter," she said in a calm but sharp tone. "And we have video evidence." The detective sighed, visibly annoyed, as if he had heard this story 1,000 times. Edith Wallace held out her cell phone, displaying the video. The sound of the slap echoed through the silence of the room. Morrison watched with disinterest. "Well, it seems there may have been a mutual escalation there," he murmured, picking up a form and typing slowly. Claire's expression hardened. Her voice, firm and icy, cut through the air. "The video shows a clear one-sided act of aggression against a woman holding a baby. What part of this do you consider to be a mutual escalation?" The detective shrugged, avoiding their gaze. "These things are rarely black and white. It may have been a misunderstanding." "Stop right there," Claire interrupted, standing up. Even at 5'4", her presence seemed to fill the room. "I want to speak to your superior, now." "Madam, this is not necessary." "It's Attorney Wallace, not Ma'am." She cut her off mercilessly. "And yes, it's necessary. Call the supervisor, please." 10 minutes later, Lieutenant Sarah Henderson entered the room. The atmosphere changed. The lieutenant watched the video without saying a word, her jaw tense. When it was over, she looked directly at Morrison. "This is assault, without a doubt, and the report will reflect exactly that. I myself will handle the case." The full report took more than an hour. Lieutenant Henderson asked detailed questions, noted down witness names, times, even the type of lighting in the bank. Meanwhile, Morrison remained huddled in a corner, visibly annoyed. When they left the police station, the sun was already high, and the heat seemed to weigh heavily on everyone's shoulders. The next stop was the regional headquarters of Riverside Trust Bank, a mirrored glass building in the center of Charlotte. The lobby exuded air conditioning and arrogance. The security guard at the entrance made a call, and the group waited almost half an hour until a representative came to pick them up. A man in a dark suit with a rehearsed smile and stony eyes greeted them. "Gregory Sherman, Director of Corporate Relations. Welcome." The office was all chrome and upholstered in leather. Through the windows, one could see half the city, a view that Diane thought probably cost more than she would earn in 10 years. "We take all complaints very seriously," Gregory began, interlacing his hands on the table. "But we prefer to resolve internal issues without resorting to the public sphere." Claire leaned forward slightly. "A customer was physically assaulted by a manager inside a branch. This is not an internal matter. It's a crime." Gregory's smile faltered. "Ms. Porter's behavior during the incident also needs to be considered." "My behavior?" Diane exclaimed, her voice trembling. "I was trying to deposit a check from a church collection." "Even so," he continued calmly, "creating a disturbance in a banking environment can have serious consequences. We don't want this situation to worsen." Edith's face turned red. "Are you threatening my goddaughter?" "Not at all," he replied, raising his hands in a theatrical gesture. "I'm just outlining possibilities." "Then lay that out before a judge," Claire retorted curtly. "And to be clear, any contact with my client must be made only through my office." Gregory Sherman maintained his smile, but the discomfort was evident. When they left, it felt like they had walked through a carefully laid trap. In the lobby, a woman in a bank uniform approached discreetly. "Wait," she murmured, looking around nervously. "I used to work at Margaret Thornton's agency." The trio stopped. "There were many complaints about her," the employee whispered, "especially against black clients. HR has a file, but the bank covered it all up. I quit because I couldn't stand seeing what she did anymore." Claire stepped forward. "Would you testify?" The woman hesitated. "I can't. I signed a confidentiality agreement when I left." She paused, took a piece of paper from her pocket, and placed it in Diane's hand. "But this person in HR feels the same way I do. She can help." Before they could ask any more questions, the woman disappeared into the lunchtime crowd. Outside, the sun blazed. The heat made the air vibrate on the asphalt. Diane adjusted Emma in the baby carrier, feeling her daughter's weight and the day's exhaustion. Edith put her arm around his shoulders. "They can try to cover it up, my daughter. But the truth has already started to leak out." Diane took a deep breath. The warm city wind carried the distant scent of coffee and gasoline. The day was far from over, and the fight was even further from being won. Edith Wallace seemed ready to go back inside and teach Gregory Sherman a lesson. Beside her, Dr. Claire Wallace frowned as she checked her cell phone. "They're already trying to hush it up," he murmured. "The legal department at Riverside Trust Bank moves fast, but so do we." The three of them stood on the hot sidewalk in downtown Charlotte, exhausted, furious, and yet determined to continue. Later, Diane Porter's apartment looked like a real war room. Papers, notes, and copies of documents were scattered across the normally immaculate dining table, while 3 laptops buzzed with constant notifications. The familiar scent of baby powder mingled with the strong aroma of fresh coffee. Diane, seated in her favorite armchair, cradled Emma in her arms. "It's arriving now," Claire announced, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Someone inside the bank just sent us a treasure." Edith appeared with a tray, serving coffee to everyone. "What kind of treasure, my daughter?" "Internal emails," Claire replied, running her finger across her laptop. "From the last 18 months, all forwarded from an anonymous address within the bank." Claire's eyes lit up. "Margaret Thornton has been doing this for years." Diane settled Emma in her lap, the soft sound of the baby's breathing contrasting with the tension in the room. "What do these emails say?" "Here's one from March," Claire read. "Customer complaint about hostile treatment. The branch manager MT accused an elderly couple of fraud. Resolved discreetly." She clicked on another one. "Black customer reports discrimination. Manager claims he argued with her. Case closed, no action taken." Edith shook her head indignantly. "I made some calls today. 6 of my friends, all account holders, said they saw this woman humiliating black people. They are ready to speak." Diane supported Emma on her shoulder and gently patted her daughter's back. "How many complaints are there?" Claire typed rapidly, her eyes gleaming with rational fury. 15 documented incidents, not counting those that never reached the system. The bank covered everything up, and there are still customer service emails that were archived without investigation. She began writing it down in a notebook, line by line. And these are just the reported cases. Imagine how many people remain silent. Edith picked up her cell phone. "I spoke with Donna Gilbert, remember? The retired librarian. She's organizing a meeting tomorrow at the Senior Citizens Center. 20 people are going to show up, all witnesses to Margaret's behavior. They're calling themselves Seniors for Justice." A tired smile appeared on their faces. The image of those women mobilizing against a corporate giant was both touching and powerful. "Look at this," Claire said, turning her attention back to the screen. An internal HR memo to the legal department dated 6 months ago. Growing concern about the pattern of complaints at the Riverside Plaza branch. Discreet transfer of the manager is recommended to avoid media attention. Diane's face paled. They knew exactly what she was doing, and they just wanted to push the problem onto another city. "Classic corporate strategy," Claire replied. "Sweep it away, rearrange it, and pretend nothing happened." She opened a new spreadsheet. "I'm putting together a timeline. Each case, each victim, each cover-up email. I don't want anything to be lost." Emma had fallen asleep. Edith helped Diane carry her to the crib before returning to the war table. "I have contacts in the press," Claire said, typing frantically. "Journalists who have already exposed institutional racism and aren't afraid to confront large corporations." "Who is the best option?" Diane asked. Rebecca Torres of the Charlotte Observer responded to Claire without hesitation. She was the one who exposed that case of racial profiling in downtown stores. Thorough, courageous, and knows how to protect her sources. Edith returned from the kitchen with sandwiches and a motherly look. "No one will fight on an empty stomach. Please eat." Diane laughed for the first time in 2 days. "And what about the person who sent the emails?" she asked. "Is that person safe?" Claire typed while she spoke. "The account was created using multiple intermediary servers. Even the bank's IT department would have difficulty tracking it. But we need to be careful. Anyone who reports a system like this is always at risk." They worked all night. Claire created an encrypted digital folder with the video, emails, testimonies, and timeline of events. Edith, tireless, coordinated the Seniors for Justice, each with her own story about the abuses suffered at the hands of her manager. Around dawn, Diane looked at the group and felt something she hadn't felt since the day of the attack. Hope. The despair that had consumed her was beginning to transform into determination. The system was large, but now they had names, faces, evidence, and each other. "Look at this," exclaimed Edith, holding up her cell phone. "A message from Donna Gilbert." She read aloud with a glint in her tired eyes. "We are ready. Tomorrow, no one will silence our voice." And for the first time in days, the silence in Diane Porter's small apartment wasn't one of fear. It was the sound of an uprising beginning. "Donna Gilbert's grandson works in the IT department of another bank branch," Edith Wallace said, adjusting her glasses as she read a message on her cell phone. "He said their system automatically records all security footage for 90 days. Dr. Claire Wallace looked up, intrigued. "If we gain access, we'll be able to prove the pattern. To show that these weren't isolated incidents," he concluded, making a new note in the notebook in front of him. "I'll include this in the request for evidence that I'm drafting." Outside, night had fallen on Charlotte, and the distant noise of cars mingled with the soft sound of the star-shaped lamp, projecting tiny points of light onto the ceiling of Emma's room. From the living room, Diane Porter gazed at the crib nestled among piles of documents, finding strength in her daughter's peaceful sleep. "Ready?" Claire asked, around 10 o'clock at night, her finger hovering over the send button. They had carefully organized each piece of evidence: videos, internal emails, testimonies, and a precise chronology of events. Diane took a deep breath and nodded. "You can send it." The soft sound of the email being sent echoed through the room. The email to Rebecca Torres of the Charlotte Observer had a simple and direct subject line: "History of discrimination at Riverside Trust Bank. Evidence attached." "Now we just have to wait," Claire said, closing her laptop. Rebecca usually responds quickly when the story has weight. Hours later, the sun timidly rose over the neighborhood. In the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet aroma of banana puree. Diane fed Emma, who opened her little mouth and giggled, oblivious to the approaching revolution. The phone vibrated. A short message from Claire appeared. "Rebecca will be covering the story. Turn on the TV to Channel 9. Before she could grab the remote, Edith rushed inside, still wearing her gardening gloves. "Diane! There's a news van outside, Channel 9. "But it's not even 9 o'clock yet," exclaimed Diane, already feeling her heart racing. "Rebecca Torres herself wants to interview you," Edith added, breathless. "She worked all night preparing the story." Diane looked at herself in her pajama pants and old t-shirt and sighed. "I'm not ready." "Go get ready," Edith said, already washing her hands. "This is our chance to be heard." 20 minutes later, Diane was in the living room, now wearing a simple blue dress and with her hair carefully braided. Her hands trembled as she applied the lip gloss. "You look perfect," Edith assured her, cradling Emma in her lap. "Strong and dignified, as you always have been." Rebecca Torres entered with her film crew, a woman in her 40s with a direct gaze and firm voice, whose presence filled the room with energy. "Let's do the interview right here," he suggested. "It'll be more personal, more human." While the cameraman adjusted the lights, Rebecca reviewed her notes. "We've confirmed the internal emails. 3 former employees admitted that the pattern of discrimination was long-standing, but your video, it's impossible to ignore." Edith handed over the flash drive with the original recording. The sound of the slap echoed in the silent room. The interview took place right there, amidst children's toys and cups of coffee. Diane maintained the calm that Claire had taught her, to speak clearly, to maintain a firm gaze without fear. He recounted every detail: the church's collection check, Margaret Thornton's immediate hostility, the moment her hand reached through the air and struck his face. "And you were holding your daughter the whole time?" Rebecca asked. "Yes," Diane replied, her voice firm. "Emma was 6 months old. I just wanted to get out of there without any trouble." At 11:30, the team was dismantling the equipment. "It airs at noon," Rebecca said. "It's the headline of the day." Time seemed to stand still until the clock struck 12. Diane, Edith, and Claire gathered in front of the TV. The Charlotte Observer News's intro announced, "Discrimination at a Charlotte bank. Video shows manager assaulting customer holding a baby." The video appeared, the sound of the slap, the shock in Diane's eyes, Emma's crying. Rebecca, in a grave tone, narrated, "A disturbing incident at Riverside Trust Bank, but the evidence suggests it wasn't an isolated case." The report exposed everything: the internal emails, the testimonies of former employees, the attempts to cover it up. The Seniors for Justice, led by Edith, gave firm statements to the camera. "For years, she humiliated black people, and nobody did anything. But now it's over," said Donna Gilbert, looking intently into the lens. Diane's cell phone started vibrating non-stop. Notifications were exploding on social media. Justice for Diane quickly rose to become one of the most talked-about topics in the country. Claire, with her laptop open, read the new headline flashing on the screen. Riverside Trust Bank's parent company has just announced that Margaret Thornton has been temporarily removed from her position. An investigation is ongoing. Edith smiled with tears in her eyes, hugging Diane tightly. They can't hide anymore, my daughter. Now the whole country has seen. And for the first time since the day of the slap, Diane Porter felt the weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by something more powerful, justice beginning to dawn in the light of day. Throughout the afternoon, the support was immediate. Community groups in Charlotte began offering legal aid and guidance. Other victims of Margaret Thornton's abuse came forward, sharing their own stories of humiliation. Riverside Trust Bank's social media was flooded with outraged comments demanding urgent action. "Look at this," said Dr. Claire Wallace, turning the notebook towards the others. On the screen, an official post from the North Carolina Department of Justice appeared, aware of the serious allegations involving Riverside Trust Bank, analyzing evidence, full investigation underway. Diane Porter's heart was racing. It was hard to believe that all of this was really happening. As night fell, she felt dizzy with emotion. In Emma's room, she rocked her sleeping daughter while reading messages on her cell phone. "You are brave for speaking out. This woman should never work with the public again. They messed with the wrong mother. We're with you." Emma slept peacefully, with her little hand intertwined with her mother's finger. Diane looked at that serene little face and for the first time felt that the horror of that day could generate something greater, a real change. Edith Wallace appeared in the doorway, a steaming mug in her hands. "The senior center wants to hold a protest tomorrow," she said with a proud half-smile. "To show the bank that we won't back down," were Donna Gilbert's exact words. Diane placed her daughter in the crib and replied softly, "I still can't believe how quickly it all happened." "The truth has the power to spread," Edith replied, her voice sweet and firm, "especially when people have the courage to listen." Before going to sleep, Diane saw new messages arrive. A local church organizing a prayer circle, the National Civil Rights Institute offering free counseling, and a group of mothers mobilizing to support her in future hearings. "Change is coming because you spoke up. We're with you." She smiled through tears, putting her phone away and kissing Emma's forehead under the soft light of the star-filled lamp. For the first time, she felt something close to peace. The following morning, the light streamed through the curtains, drawing golden patterns on the bedroom floor. Diane had barely slept, but her exhaustion mingled with a newfound energy, the strength of someone who had finally been heard. The monitor showed Emma fast asleep. Diane went to the kitchen to make coffee when a knock on the door startled her. "It's me," called the familiar voice, "and I think you'll want to look outside." Diane opened the door. Edith was there holding 2 cups from the neighborhood coffee shop. "I thought you needed this," he said, handing one over. "A crowd is forming." They approached the window. On the street, 3 news vans occupied the sidewalk. Reporters adjusted cameras. Technicians tested microphones. A small group of elderly people, led by staff from the community center, held hand-painted signs. "Support Diane and end banking discrimination." "The folks at WSOC TV want an exclusive," Edith said, scrolling through messages on her phone. "The Charlotte News, too. Even national networks are calling." Diane's phone vibrated. It was Dr. Claire. "Good morning, warrior. I hope you're ready, because today is going to be intense. The civil case is practically concluded, and it's strong. We found evidence of at least 7 other cases of abuse committed by Margaret Thornton, all covered up by the bank." "7?" Diane repeated, incredulous. "All involving minorities or the elderly. And remember the employee who gave you the note?" Claire said. "She had been keeping emails and memos for months. That girl was the key." While Diane was trying to process the information, a new notification arrived. The mayor's office had published an official statement condemning all forms of discrimination in the city's financial institutions. "Don't talk to the press without me," Claire instructed. "But if you want to wave to the people down there, and go ahead, they're there for you." Diane changed her clothes, putting on the same simple blue dress from the previous day's interview, and carefully braided her hair. Emma stirred in her crib. It was time for her morning feeding. "I'll get it," said Edith, when another knock sounded at the door. Upon opening it, it revealed itself to be Pastor Marcus Allen, accompanied by members of Diane's church. They brought freshly baked muffins, fruit salad, and something even more precious, unconditional support. "We came to pray for you," the pastor said, placing his hand on Diane's shoulder. "And also to remind you that when the truth comes out, no one can silence it again." Diane looked around, the apartment full of people, the smell of coffee, the sounds of babies, elderly people and neighbors on the street. For a moment, everything seemed suspended, the chaos, the fear, the pain, and all that remained was unity. What had begun as an unfair slap was now becoming a movement, and Diane Porter, the mother who refused to bow her head, was the face of hope for an entire country. "The whole community is with you, my daughter," assured Pastor Marcus Allen, placing a firm hand on Diane Porter's shoulder, while 82-year-old Helen Patterson tenderly cradled Emma in her lap. "We've created a community fund to help with expenses and anything else you might need." Throughout the morning, Diane's apartment became a meeting point. Groups of elderly people who frequented the Riverside Trust Bank began arriving one after another, each with their own story of abuse and humiliation. Mr. Lawrence, leaning on his cane, recounted how Margaret Thornton had humiliated his granddaughter over a simple deposit. Ms. Kim, with her daughter translating from Korean, reported that she was forced to wait for hours while priority customers were allowed to go ahead of her. And Mrs. Wanda Jackson, with tears in her eyes, held Diane's hand and said, "You did what we were all afraid to do, my daughter. You faced her." Mid-morning, Dr. Claire Wallace arrived with her laptop open and her voice full of determination. "The criminal complaint is ready," he announced. 27 pages documenting a pattern of discriminatory behavior, and we're not just going after Margaret, but the entire system that protected her. She rotated the screen so that everyone could see. "This is the timeline we've put together. Each incident, each suppressed complaint, each cover-up email. It's devastating." Outside, support grew stronger every hour. The corner coffee shop sent boxes of candy and thermos flasks of coffee to the supporters gathered on the sidewalk. A group of mothers organized a drive to collect diapers and baby products to help Diane and other affected families. The entire neighborhood seemed to awaken to something bigger, an old wound finally being brought into the light. "The WSOC TV staff wants a follow-up story," Edith Wallace said, checking her cell phone. Rebecca Torres said that yesterday's report broke audience and website traffic records on the Charlotte Observer. Diane, sitting on the sofa with Emma playing in her lap, read the messages that kept arriving. "You are showing what courage is. Thank you for speaking truth to those in power. This is how change begins." Meanwhile, Claire was participating in a video conference with her legal team. "The bank is in a panic," he explained. "Their press office is trying to contain the damage, but there's no way to delete that video. We've cornered them." Edith interrupted excitedly. "The community centers are organizing a protest for tomorrow. They're going to call it the Rally for Dignity. Half the neighborhood has already confirmed their attendance." Diane put her hand to her chest, overcome with emotion. It was almost impossible to believe that that moment of humiliation on the bench had transformed into something so big. On the other side of the screen, Claire smiled. "And it doesn't stop there. Other Riverside Trust Bank employees started contacting us from various branches. It seems Margaret's reputation had been known for a long time." Diane went to the window. Outside, I saw groups of people arriving, some with personalized t-shirts, others with handmade signs. A local food truck had parked nearby, offering free lunch to the protesters. "We're trending again," Edith said, fiddling with her cell phone. "The story is spreading all over the country. People from all regions are telling similar stories." Emma babbled happily, clutching her teddy bear. Diane hugged her tightly, feeling the mixture of exhaustion and strength that only mothers know. The fear and shame were still there, but now they shared space with something new, a purpose. "I think we should," Claire began, but stopped when both of their cell phones vibrated at the same time. The screens lit up with the last-minute alert. Diane read the headline, and her blood ran cold. "Bank releases new security footage. Watch the full video of the confrontation." Her hands trembled as she touched the link. The video started automatically. Grainy, edited, cropped images. Diane's heart almost stopped. It wasn't Edith's original recording. It was a manipulated version. Quick cuts, distorted angles. Sections showed Diane gesticulating, making it seem like she was yelling or threatening. The slap scene, the most important part, had been erased, replaced by a conveniently shaky blur. "That's impossible," Diane murmured, her voice trembling. "That's not what happened." Claire picked up her cell phone, carefully analyzing the video. "They tampered with everything," she said indignantly. "Look at these cuts, these time jumps. These are fabricated files." Edith leaned over the table, narrowing her eyes. "Where's the part where she grabs you? It's gone. They cut it all out." The article accompanying the video cited internal bank sources, alleging that Diane Porter had behaved in an aggressive and erratic manner during a routine procedure. He also said that she had put other customers at risk by gesturing wildly while holding the baby. "They're trying to destroy me," Diane whispered, her voice faltering. The air seemed to disappear from the room. The space that once vibrated with hope was now suffocated by the injustice of a new lie. Dr. Claire Wallace slowly closed her laptop, her gaze cold and determined. "So this is how they want to play. Well, now it's really going to begin." And in that heavy silence, Diane Porter understood that the fight was far from over. The supporters gathered outside seemed like silent eyes, watching every move inside Diane Porter's small apartment. The buzzing sound of a cell phone broke the silence, a message from the director of the Eastwood Community Center, where Diane worked. "We need to talk about the recent media coverage. Please come earlier tomorrow." Across the room, Dr. Claire Wallace was on the phone, pacing back and forth, her voice tense and sharp. "We need to get ahead of this. I want technology experts analyzing the doctored video. They can't just—" She stopped when Diane's phone rang again. The screen showed something that chilled the air. Mecklenburg County Child Protective Services. "Don't answer," Claire said immediately, raising her hand. "Leave it to me." She answered, changing her tone to that of a professional and firm one. "This is Dr. Claire Wallace, Diane Porter's attorney." Diane, meanwhile, barely heard the conversation. Her gaze fixed on the cell phone screen, showing her social media feeds flooded with cruel comments. "Who brings a baby along to start a fight? Typical troublemaker playing the victim. They should investigate this woman as a mother." The elderly people who were still in the house began to disperse, feeling uncomfortable. Only Edith Wallace remained, her face thick with worry, watching Diane slide her finger through the torrent of digital hate. "They've filed a formal complaint," Claire announced, hanging up the phone. "They allege you put Emma at risk during a premeditated confrontation. The Department of Children's Services needs to investigate every complaint involving a child. They want to visit your home tomorrow." "That's absurd," Edith exclaimed indignantly. "We all saw what happened." "They're trying to bury the truth with a new narrative," Claire explained grimly. "Create enough doubt, make enough noise, and the audience starts to doubt everything." Diane's cell phone was vibrating incessantly. Reporters asking for statements, anonymous messages, The director of the community center demanding explanations, groups of mothers cancelling activities. The news vans began to withdraw from the streets, not in solidarity, but in search of a new angle. From the window, Diane watched her supporters slowly disperse, confused by the distorted headlines. "We need to respond quickly," Claire said, typing furiously. "I'm drafting a public statement about the video manipulation. Edith, ask your nephew to analyze the original file. We need to prove that it was tampered with." But Diane could barely hear. Online comments multiplied. "Fire that woman from the community center. Violent, deceitful, self-serving, probably trying to extort the bank. Where is this child's father?" Emma started to cry, sensing her mother's nervousness. Diane picked her up, trying to take a deep breath. "My whole life," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I worked so hard to give her a decent future, and they're destroying everything like it's nothing." Edith insisted that she eat something, but the plate looked like it was made of ashes. Claire continued working tirelessly, making calls, answering emails, preparing the counterattack, while hatred spread like wildfire. Notifications kept pouring in non-stop. Message from the center's director: "We need to discuss your public image." Email from the church committee: "Perhaps it would be best to step away temporarily." Notification from the mothers group: "Children's event cancelled due to the repercussions." The hours dragged on like lead. Edith had to go back home, promising to return early the next day. Claire stayed late, surrounded by piles of papers and cups of cold coffee. "That's what they do," he said, his voice tired but resolute. "They take the victim and make them seem unstable, dangerous, crazy. It's an old tactic, but we won't let it go. Tomorrow we react, and forcefully." When Claire finally left, the apartment fell silent. The night was dense, almost suffocating. Diane sat with Emma, asleep in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her thumb. The clock showed a little after midnight. The cell phone was still vibrating on the table, each notification a new wound. She had silenced the sound, but she couldn't stop looking. Irresponsible mother. Arrest that woman. She should lose custody of her daughter. Tears began to fall silently, soaking Emma's blanket. Everything he had built, his reputation, his job, his dignity, was being torn apart by lies. And now they were coming after his daughter. A sob escaped, then another. He tried to muffle the sound so as not to wake Emma, but the desperation was stronger. On the cell phone screen, the doctored video was repeated on all the country's news websites, spreading poison and reversing roles. The aggressor was now the innocent one, and the woman who had fought for justice was portrayed as a threat. Diane Porter's trauma had been transformed into a spectacle, and for the first time since the tragedy began, she realized the magnitude of the power she was facing. The maternal instinct that made Diane Porter protect her daughter was being transformed, in the eyes of public opinion, into evidence of a threat. The night passed in silence. Sitting on the sofa, she wept with Emma in her arms, feeling the world she had built with so much effort crumble around her. The alarm rang at 6 in the morning, cutting short what little sleep she had managed to get. His neck ached, his body felt heavy, and Emma still slept peacefully on his chest. The cell phone screen was a battlefield. Notifications, hate messages, missed calls, venomous comments. During the night, the doctored video had gone viral, spreading its distorted version like wildfire. At precisely 7:30 a.m., a sharp knock echoed on the door. Diane froze. When it opened, 2 women were in the hallway with clipboards and name tags hanging from them. "Mrs. Porter," one of them said, in a calm, professional voice, "I'm Jessica Reynolds, and this is Thomas Campbell from Mecklenburg County Child Protective Services. We've come to make a home visit to check on the child's well-being." Diane's hands trembled as she invited them inside. She had spent the night cleaning the house, even though it was spotless. On the coffee table, everything was ready. Emma's vaccination card, medical records, a folder with appointment receipts and prescriptions. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked, his voice breaking. "No, thank you," Jessica replied, opening her tablet. "We need to check the rooms where the child usually stays." They scanned the small apartment with a meticulous gaze. In Emma's room, they saw the protected electrical outlets, the sturdy crib, and the colorful mobile. In the kitchen, the jars of homemade baby food and the bottles of infant formula are stored in a clean place. In the bathroom, the plastic bathtub, the non-slip mat, the hygiene products organized. Thomas picked up a small book from the table and leafed through it. "Does she like stories?" he asked with a slight smile. "Every night," Diane replied. "I love the sounds of the animals." Jessica reviewed the documents: exemplary medical history, up-to-date vaccinations, documented routine with sleep and meal times. Meanwhile, Emma, rocking in her baby carrier, was handing out delighted smiles to the visitors. After half an hour, Jessica closed the tablet. "Your house is spotless, Mrs. Porter. Your daughter is healthy and well cared for. There is no indication of negligence or risk." Diane's legs almost gave way. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Thomas nodded, casting a meaningful glance at the TV, where a news report about the case was still playing. "Let's note that the complaint appears to be retaliatory in nature." As soon as the door closed, Diane ran to the phone. "Claire, they've left. They said everything is fine." "Great," replied the lawyer. "Get dressed. I'll meet you in half an hour. Edith is bringing reinforcements." The neighborhood diner was teeming with people when Diane arrived. Edith Wallace had gathered a small army of elderly people, former clients of Riverside Trust Bank, and Nathan Cooper, the young computer technician from Diane's church. He opened his laptop on the table and spoke softly but firmly. "I've been analyzing the images the bank released. There are serious flaws." He zoomed in on the screen, revealing duplicate frames and abrupt cuts. "Observe these time jumps, and here the metadata." The video was edited several times on the same day it was released. Dr. Claire Wallace leaned forward, jotting things down quickly. "Can you prove this officially?" "I've already proven it." Nathan turned the notebook around. "The original data is still in the file. They edited it hastily, thinking no one would notice." Edith held Diane's hand, her eyes welling with tears. "We did it, my dear. We did it." The doorbell rang, and everyone turned around. Rachel Stevens, the young former bank teller who had left the warning note for Diane, was standing there, pale, trembling, but with her chin held high. "I want to give a statement," she said, approaching. "I saw everything." Margaret Thornton had been doing this for months. She would choose minority clients and make up excuses to refuse service. "I witnessed at least 6 instances." Claire's eyes lit up. "Would you be willing to testify officially?" Rachel nodded. "I have saved emails, internal messages where she bragged about it. I was scared. But seeing what they're doing to Diane, I can't stay silent anymore." The table turned into a war barracks. Nathan finalized the technical report, proving the adulteration. Rachel wrote her testimony. Edith contacted more witnesses from the group of elderly people. Claire coordinated everything: phone calls, statements, scheduled interviews. As the sun began to set, they had a devastating dossier in their hands. Evidence of digital manipulation, witness accounts, internal bank emails, and even the medical reports showing the marks from the slap Diane had received. Claire took a deep breath, looking at the group surrounding her. "We have everything. Now we need to act fast before they try another move." Diane, exhausted but determined, looked at her daughter sleeping in the stroller beside her. She knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time since the beginning, she wasn't alone. "They'll try to discredit every piece of evidence if we give them time," said Dr. Claire Wallace, her firm voice cutting through the murmur of the table. "We have to attack with everything at once." She turned to Diane Porter, who was watching her with a heavy heart. "Tomorrow morning, we will hold a press conference right in front of the Riverside Trust Bank headquarters. Enough of letting them control the narrative. We will show the country who they really are and what they have done to you." Diane looked around. She saw Edith's protective gaze, Nathan's concentration, Rachel's renewed courage, and the solidarity of the elderly people who had become her support network. For the first time since the doctored video had been released, she felt her strength returning. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Rest," Claire replied firmly. "Tomorrow, you just need to tell your truth. We'll take care of the rest." As the group began to disperse, Edith hugged Diane tightly. "We're all with you, my dear. These corporate sharks thought they could silence you, that they could make you seem unstable. But all they achieved was giving us what we needed to expose this rotten system." Back home, Diane tucked Emma into her crib. The daughter's soft purring filled the room, and the hateful comments on social media no longer seemed so loud. Tomorrow, she would no longer be the woman defamed by a manipulated video. She would be the mother who faced a giant, with evidence, with witnesses, and with an army by her side. She bent down, kissed her daughter's forehead, and murmured, "They messed with the wrong mother, my little one." The rising sun reflected off the glass facades of the Riverside Trust Bank headquarters when Diane arrived at 8:15 a.m. He got out of Edith's car, his heart racing. The sidewalk was already bustling with activity. The elderly members of Edith's support network set up chairs, Diane's church members handed out flyers, and neighborhood residents gathered with makeshift signs. In the center of the crowd, Dr. Claire Wallace reviewed her notes in front of a hastily assembled podium. 3 vans from television stations were positioned in the parking lot. WSOC-TV, WCNC Charlotte, and Spectrum News, with reporters broadcasting the first live segments. Rachel Stevens paced back and forth, the papers trembling in her hands. "Remember," Claire said, approaching Diane, "we are now in control of the narrative. They can no longer hide behind a manipulated video." Nathan Cooper, the IT technician, had set up a portable screen displaying side-by-side comparisons. On one side, the doctored video. On the other, Edith's original video. The edits, cuts, and metadata flashed with colors and captions, simple enough for anyone to understand. "The packages are ready," Edith announced, pushing a cart full of brown paper envelopes. Each envelope contained screenshots from the digital forensics analysis, witness statements, Rachel's declarations, and even medical photos of the bruises on Diane's arm where Margaret Thornton had grabbed her. As the clock approached 8:45, more people arrived. Elderly people who had witnessed the assault, parents of Emma's daycare students, church members, and even small business owners who had also faced banking discrimination. They formed a protective semicircle around the podium. "Look," Rachel whispered, pointing inside the building. Behind the tinted glass doors, bank employees crowded around a manager. A security guard spoke hurriedly on the radio. When the clock struck 8:45, Dr. Claire Wallace approached the microphone. The camera lights came on. The cell phones were raised. The murmuring ceased. "Good morning," Claire began, her clear voice echoing. "We are here today to expose the deliberate manipulation of evidence by Riverside Trust Bank in an attempt to cover up the assault suffered by Diane Porter and her infant daughter." The audience fell silent. She proceeded to detail the timeline of events, while the screen displayed the doctored frames. The bank released edited images to portray a victim as the aggressor, but their mistake was underestimating the power of truth. Rachel stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "I worked at that agency. I saw everything happen. Manager Margaret Thornton humiliated black people, the elderly and vulnerable customers. He refused to provide care and fabricated scams. I have 6 documented cases with dates and names. Inside the building, it was possible to see executives walking back and forth, holding phones to their ears." Edith then picked up the microphone. "I recorded the original video, and I can prove that there are no cuts, no manipulation. The metadata is intact. On the big screen, Nathan expanded the digital timeline. "Look here," he explained calmly to the cameras. "These frame rate jumps and compression differences are technical evidence of tampering." The moment when Margaret Thornton hit Diane, with Emma in her lap, provoked murmurs of indignation. Some spectators put their hands to their mouths, others began to applaud. More press vans have arrived. Reporters frantically took notes, cameras spun 360 degrees. The crowd already numbered over 100 people, with signs waving in the sun. "Justice for Diane. Stop profiting from racism. Truth has a name and proof." Dr. Claire Wallace observed the scene with a steady glint in her eyes. What began as an attempt to silence a black woman and single mother had transformed into an entire movement, a collective voice demanding dignity. And while the original video continued to play on the screen, Diane Porter took a deep breath. This time, the cameras didn't intimidate her. They were living proof that the truth had found its way. Riverside Trust Bank had erased crucial seconds from the footage, specifically the moment when Margaret Thornton assaulted Diane Porter, but left digital traces, like someone trying to tear pages out of a book without hiding the chapter numbers. Dr. Claire Wallace handed out thick folders of evidence to journalists. "It's all here," she announced, her voice firm. "The pattern of abuse, the corporate cover-up, the deliberate manipulation of evidence, and, most revoltingly, the attempt to use the Department of Children's Services as a weapon against a mother who only wanted to protect her daughter." Inside the building, employees crowded by the windows, watching the growing crowd. A bank security car pulled up, but the officers stood at a distance, unsure what to do in the face of a peaceful yet increasingly numerous demonstration. "We demand accountability," Claire continued, raising the microphone. "Not just for Diane, but for all the customers who have been intimidated, discriminated against, or silenced by this institution." Diane watched the reporters leaf through the packets of evidence, their faces shifting from professional neutrality to astonishment. Some began frantically calling their newsrooms, requesting live nationally broadcast coverage. "Ms. Porter," shouted a reporter, "do you have anything to say?" Diane went up to the podium with Emma strapped to her chest in the baby carrier. Silence fell over the crowd. "I came to this bank as a customer," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I brought a legitimate deposit from a church collection. I was attacked while holding my daughter, and when I sought justice, they tried to destroy my reputation and even threatened custody of my baby. This says everything about who they are and why we're here." Flashes went off. The cameras recorded every word. More reporters crowded in front of the headquarters, while Dr. Claire Wallace maintained a serene posture, holding the open dossier in her hands. "We've received several interview requests from bank executives," Claire announced. "We'll wait here until they have the courage to speak out." Edith Wallace raised her chin and added, "We brought chairs, water and tests. We can stay all day." The morning sun rose, reflecting off the mirrored windows of the building. Inside, the executives gestured wildly and the phones rang incessantly. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Rachel Stevens stood firmly by Diane's side. Nathan Cooper kept the screen displaying the technical evidence, and Edith handed out water to the protesters. The air vibrated with anticipation. "Look!" someone shouted. A black luxury car sped into the parking lot, surrounded by cameras and flashes. Dr. Claire Wallace narrowed her eyes. Right on time. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. The glass doors opened, and 3 executives descended in silence. Ahead of them, a tall man in a navy blue suit tried to maintain his composure. "Brian Patterson," Claire murmured, "Regional Director." The journalists hurried over, surrounding the trio. "Mr. Patterson," shouted a reporter, "how does the bank explain the doctored images?" "There are allegations of systematic discrimination," another added. Patterson raised his hands in a rehearsed gesture of calm. "We take all allegations seriously. "Then explain that," Claire interrupted, stepping forward and holding up a sheet of paper. It was a table with time markings. Her official version is exactly 37 seconds short, the 37 seconds in which her manager assaults a mother holding a baby. The crowd drew closer. Nathan pushed the screen forward, displaying the two videos side by side, the real one and the manipulated one. The contrast was devastating. Patterson's face paled. "I need time to analyze it," he stammered. "Time?" Edith shouted, her voice firm with the strength of someone no longer afraid. "You've already had your time. You used it to fabricate evidence and silence a mother." The other executives whispered amongst themselves, uneasy. Sweat dripped from Patterson's forehead as the cameras captured every second of his hesitation. "Ms. Porter deserves answers now, not tomorrow," Claire demanded. "Why did the bank protect the attacker? Why were their accounts frozen? Why was a false complaint filed against her with Child Protective Services?" Before Patterson could offer any excuse, the sound of sirens echoed through the parking lot. But these were no ordinary vehicles. They were official cars, black, with the emblem of the FBI field office. 3 investigators came down, folders and briefcases in hand. The older one showed the badge. "Mr. Patterson," announced Special Agent Michael Foster, "we have a warrant to seize digital records. We have received evidence of evidence tampering and institutional discrimination within your company. We will need immediate access to your servers and security cameras." The regional director's face turned as white as a sheet. The executives retreated hastily, trying to distance themselves. As the investigators entered the building, the crowd began to applaud. Diane Porter stood in the center, with Emma sleeping peacefully against her chest. The sun reflected in her teary eyes. She had confronted power, and this time the truth could no longer be erased. The Riverside Trust Bank parking lot had become a silent battleground where the truth was finally beginning to overcome fear. FBI investigators entered the building under the watchful eye of cameras. Inside, employees whispered, executives exchanged anxious glances, and the arrogance that had sustained the empire of silence and discrimination began to crumble, inch by inch. Outside, Diane Porter remained motionless, Emma sleeping peacefully in her lap. Oblivious to the commotion gripping the country, the sun was now high, and posters fluttered with messages of support. Justice for Diane. End institutional racism. Mothers won't be silenced. Edith Wallace held Diane's hand tightly. Behind them, dozens of seniors, the Dignity Network, lined up, forming a kind of human mural. Dr. Claire Wallace watched the cameras that were broadcasting the moment live across the country. "They thought they could manipulate the truth," Claire murmured. "But they forgot that the truth has a face, a voice, and a mother." Minutes later, one of the researchers reappeared at the glass door with a USB drive held up between his fingers. "We found the original files." The murmur turned to applause. The journalists approached, microphones at the ready, while the agent confirmed, "Internal footage confirms the assault." The video was deliberately edited. There were direct orders from management to cover up the incident. Brian Patterson's face paled in front of the cameras. "I want my lawyer," he murmured, but his voice was barely audible over the growing noise of the crowd. The FBI car drove off carrying computers, hard drives, and sealed folders. The bank's logo, once imposing, seemed smaller, swallowed up by the crowd that cheered and wept simultaneously. When journalists asked for a final word, Diane climbed back onto the podium. There was silence. Not even the wind dared to interrupt. "Today isn't about me," she began, her voice trembling but firm. "It's about every person who has ever been treated as invisible. It's about every mother who was discredited, every elderly person who was humiliated, every black woman who had to swallow her tears to avoid losing her job or her dignity." She paused, gazing at the horizon of cameras and attentive faces. "They tried to erase me. They tried to make me doubt myself. But they forgot that when a mother fights for her child, no one can silence her. The words pierced the crowd like lightning. Emma stirred in her lap, opening her curious eyes, and in that instant, the image of the two of them, mother and daughter, before a crumbling giant, was displayed on every screen in the country. Hours later, the headlines were already circulating on social media. Riverside Trust Bank under investigation for fraud and discrimination. Black mother exposes evidence tampering and mobilizes the nation. Courage that changed everything. In the following days, the events unfolded swiftly and relentlessly. Margaret Thornton was removed from her position and subsequently placed in pre-trial detention for destruction of evidence and assault. Brian Patterson resigned before the internal hearing. Riverside Trust Bank issued a public apology, but it was too late. The damage, or rather the revelation, had been done. The case inspired legislative changes. The Diane and Emma Act, enacted months later, which required all financial institutions to maintain full transparency in access to security recordings and prohibited the use of false accusations against vulnerable customers. And while the system was trying to recover, Diane's life was taking a different turn. She received invitations from universities, civil rights groups, and NGOs. She was honored on TV programs, but refused several of them, saying, "I don't want to be a symbol, I want to be an example." She returned to the now renovated Eastwood Community Center to continue the social work she always loved. Edith had become a local celebrity, cheerful and tireless, leading talks on respect and empathy. Rachel Stevens and Nathan Cooper were hired by an organization that investigated corporate crimes. And Dr. Claire Wallace, with the serenity of someone who knew the weight of a rare victory, opened a foundation in the name of both of them. The Emma Institute, Justice and Truth. But nothing compared to the afternoon when Diane returned to the neighborhood square months later. The children played, the elderly chatted under the shade of the trees, and Emma, now older, laughed inside the playground, pushing the swing by herself. Diane sat on a bench looking up at the sky. He thought about everything he had lost and everything he had gained back. The pain was still there, but now mixed with something new. Peace. An elderly man approached, smiling. "You're the lady from the bank, right?" Diane smiled back. "No." She looked at Emma, running between the trees. "I am Emma's mother, and that was exactly what I wanted to be." As the sun set over Charlotte, reflecting off the tall windows of the buildings, the name Diane Porter was no longer just that of a victim. It was the story of a woman who transformed injustice into courage and courage into change. And that night, the entire country went to sleep knowing what she had always known from the beginning. The truth can be manipulated, distorted, hidden, but never erased. And so ends another true story of courage, resilience, and truth. A story that shows that justice, however late it may seem, always finds a way to be heard. Diane confronted an entire system, fought against prejudice and manipulation, and proved that no lie is strong enough to extinguish the strength of a determined mother. Now I want to know from you, how did this story make you feel? Comment below where you're watching from and what struck you most about this story. Your opinion is what keeps this space alive and ensures that stories like Diane and Emma's continue to be told. If you believe that truth still matters, leave a like, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories that reveal human strength in the face of injustice. See you in the next episode.